Welcome to the Social Roundup with Sala, right here on Relax Radio. Today we have an interesting topic that we will be talking about, which is the Uyghur Muslim situation in China. Now, for those who are not familiar with this, don't worry. We will be taking you through the process and we will be taking you through what has happened in China and what has resulted in the discrimination towards the Uyghur Muslims. And we will be discussing right here on Relax Radio. So we want you to tell us what you think about this as well. Tell us right here, and you can comment on our Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. You can even join us on Twitch as well, right? With that being said, we would love for you to engage with us on conversations right here, and do stay tuned with us and let us know how we can make this show more interesting for you. And with that being said, let's move into the discussion. What is happening with the Uyghur Muslims? Now, for those who don't know who the Uyghur Muslims are a minority in China, right? They are a minority in Xinjiang, which was not necessarily part of China back then. This is a minority that was based out of China's Beijing's political power, but China seemed to somehow take control over them, and over time China has actually become forcible with them. And this is something that we need to think about. This is something we need to be addressing, because human rights groups believe that China has detained more than 1 million Uyghur Muslims against their will over the past few years, and this is not something that should be taken very lightly. This is in fact something that needs to be taken very seriously, right? And China over time has started calling it re-education camps and try to rebrand what exactly they are doing with the Muslims from the state of Xinjiang, right? And these Muslims are somehow forced into this system of re-education, whatever China may be calling it, or whatever the world internationally calls it. Now, again, we need to keep in mind that the international community does not call this re-education camps, right? The international community, in fact, calls it some form of discrimination towards the minorities. And even though China ignores these claims and ignores these accusations continuously, it's something that we need to keep in mind and something that we need to understand, because this isn't the case, right? With that being said, we also need to understand that there is evidence that Uyghurs are being used as forced labor and women are being forcibly sterilized as well, which is not something normal, which isn't something that we need to be taking lightly. In fact, this is something that we need to be taking very, very seriously, right? It shows that they have been tortured and that the situation is getting out of hand. Now, the international community needs to also take into consideration that China is a powerful country, and as much as we would love to be in control of this situation, and as much as we would love to make a change with this situation, it's not going to be easy to make a change with this, right? Because of the fact that ultimately what's going to happen is that China, as a powerful economic power, is going to control the economic status of the entire world, because we step into their territory, because we step into their boundaries of what they're doing with their people as well, right? So it is ultimately something that the international community has tried to address for the past few years, to be honest, right? And it's something that has been continuously ignored. And the US has made these accusations towards China as well of committing genocide in Xinjiang, which is, to be honest, the truth ultimately, right? And the leading human rights groups, Amnesty and Human Rights Watch, have also published reports accusing China of crimes against humanity, which is ultimately the truth. But China has been stubborn, and China has continuously rebranded it or renamed it, or called it re-education instead of genocide, right? Because ultimately what they're trying to do through this process is combat separatism and Islamic militancy in the region of Xinjiang. But this isn't, to be honest, the real case with the Uyghur Muslims. They are just looking to have their religious freedom, to practice their religion within their state freely and not have to worry about being controlled by the government. Ultimately, this religious freedom needs to be given to the people. This religious freedom needs to be given to the Uyghur Muslims to practice their religion freely. And taking away those human rights necessarily means that China is violating their public's human rights ultimately, right? So it is something for us to think about. Now, we need to talk about the Uyghur Muslims and what makes them different from the general public of China, right? They speak their own language, which is similar to Turkish, right? And see themselves as culturally and ethnically close to Central Asian nations, and this makes them different to the Xinjiang population, right? And they make up less than half of the Xinjiang population, situation, to be honest, right? This shows that ultimately the power that the Uyghur Muslims hold when it comes to standing against the Chinese government is very much less than the power the Chinese government would have over them, right? And we have seen that China has taken the extra effort, gone that extra mile to make sure that the population within this region doesn't look like they're being tortured, doesn't look like they're being kept there forcibly, right? Which means that they have taken pictures of people, students within classrooms, showing that it's vocational training ultimately, and that people are willing to do this, that the general population, that the Rohingya, that sorry, the Uyghur Muslims are willing to be put through this training, which isn't the case, to be honest, right? And we also see that there have been pictures of women hijabless or not covering their head, which shows that this is not something that they be doing willingly, because ultimately, as religious, as people who follow the religion of Islam, they would be wearing the hijab, which means that the Chinese government is forcing it upon them to remove the hijab as well, which is, to be honest, something that we all need to be internationally looking into, something that we need to push for, right? Something that we need to think about when we are speaking about human rights, even online platforms, right? Now we see that the Uyghur Muslim situation is also something that became trending at a point on social media. We see that people on TikTok, on Instagram started making info slides, videos, updated their profile pictures, showing their support, standing in solidarity with the Uyghur Muslims, showing their support ultimately as an international community. But like I mentioned, it is important to also keep in mind about how much of power the Chinese government holds, right? Internationally, how among other governments, China is in much more control. China decides what the economic status of other countries are going to be. China decides what the economic status of with even with the countries, even with ultimately with situations like with taking into consideration the power that the Chinese government holds. It's not just to do with the government in itself. It's also to do with the fact that the people are getting affected by it as well, right? So keeping all of this in mind, you need to somehow keep in mind that we have to do something, whatever it takes to be done, to raise awareness on this situation, to talk about it, and to bring about enough and more attention to this topic. With that being said, let's go in for a small break and be back right here on the social roundup with Sala, right here on Relax Radio. Welcome back to the Social Roundup with Sala right here on Relax Radio. Do follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, and even YouTube. You can watch our videos 24/7. We're with you live right here, talking to you, taking you through interesting topics and themes ranging from entertainment to sports to business to travel to social issues and self love as well. And there's more, to be honest. The list just keeps growing and going on, right? With that being said, we've been talking about something interesting and something that is of much importance right now, which is the state of the Uyghur Muslims in China, right? And if you feel like you know something and you want to discuss this or you want to know more about it, do drop in a comment and we will try to address it somehow here on the Social Roundup with Salah, right? With that being said, let's go into what we were talking about. Now, we need to understand that the Uyghur Muslims in China have been, and this is with evidence, being tortured by the Chinese government, right? They've been put through physical as well as psychological torture in the camps, right? Entire families have disappeared over time, and even detainees were tortured physically and mentally as well. We also see that there is evidence of almost a complete surveillance state in Xinjiang as well, right? And this has been the case for multiple years now, and this is something that needs to be addressed, something that needs to be taken very, very seriously, right? A number of attacks have been blamed on separatist Xinjiang and beyond over the past decade, to be honest, and that's a really, really long time, right? About 200 people, mostly Han Chinese, were killed in the rioting process as well in Urumqi in 2009, right? And this shows us that, ultimately this situation is physically a very violent situation and it's not getting the attention that it should be getting, right? And we also spoke about how China has been calling this, some sort of vocational training, a re-education camp, and that it's not something that is serious that we need to be addressing, right? And even at a UN meeting in Geneva in August 2018, Chinese official reported that 1 million Uyghurs were being held in re-education centers was untrue, which shows that ultimately, even though they are rebranding or renaming these camps as re-educational camps, they are also denying the fact that people have been detained there, people have been kept there, right? In fact, like he has also mentioned, he goes on to say in October 2018, the top official mentions that it is vocational education and it is something that people were willing to do, right? And it's to prevent terrorism. Now, the truth is that Islamophobia is an international problem. It is something that has been, spreading almost like a virus among communities, among countries, among people of different nations, right? Now, even in China, we see a similar situation, except we see the Chinese government taking extreme measures or, getting extremely violent with their people just to simply address this problem, which shouldn't be the case, right? And again, we want to understand that the government of China ultimately is being Islamophobic in this situation and that they're not being fair towards their population, right? And we also see that, ultimately them being forced to change their beliefs is not something that is normal, and this is not the way to be dealing with terrorism. Now, what exactly is terrorism and why have we continuously associated Muslims or the religion Islam with terrorism instead of associating it with people who are actually involved in terrorism? We see people calling other people who do engage in terrorism as extremists, and then we see people who are Muslims who are engaged in terrorism called terrorists, right? Now, again, it isn't wrong to associate people with terrorism if they are terrorists or if they are engaging in terrorist activities, but it is wrong to associate a religion or a belief, because taking into consideration the terrorists or the Muslim terrorists in comparison to the Muslim community in itself, it is a very, very small population, right? So is it fair to hold a whole community, a whole group that believes in a religion, accountable for the acts of a minority population, right? And again, let me re-emphasize on this: the population of Muslim terrorists are a very, very, very small number in comparison to the Muslim population in itself, right? And again, we need to talk about how people of other religions who have also, or other beliefs rather, who have been terrorists have been called extremists in other countries and not called terrorists, right? right? Now, this isn't normal. This isn't something that we need to be taking lightly as well, right? And now let's look at what the world is doing as of now, right? We see that there's growing international criticism against China's treatment of the Uyghur Muslims, and that is pretty much no country has taken any action beyond that, because to be honest, we spoke about how China is ultimately very powerful, and China is in control of the economic status of the international world, right? This is something that we need to know, because ultimately China is a very, very powerful economy, and the power it holds is beyond our control, right? We also see that the British Prime Minister Theresa May's visit to China in January and February 2018 also says that, she talks about how ultimately it is something to be concerned over the treatment of the Muslims in Xinjiang as well. So this shows us that the visits made by the Prime Minister itself show that, ultimately, well, look, there is a problem here and that needs to be addressed ultimately, right? And this is something that we need to be taking seriously, because this has been the case with multiple other governments as well, other political leaders as well. Other political leaders have also accused China of this crime, right? Ultimately, it is genocide. Let's use the word genocide, because that is ultimately the suitable word for this crime. It is not a re-education camp. It is not a vocational training that is being given to its population, and China needs to be held accountable for this, right? So keeping that in mind, overall, what we need to be taking back from this is that, look, China is violating the rights of Muslims within their region. And this has been happening for quite some time, and it is something that we need to be taking seriously. How do we talk about this? How do we raise awareness? We don't want it to simply be a trend, right? Because that was the case with the Uyghur Muslims. We saw that, on TikTok, on Instagram, people made slides, people spoke about it, people changed their profile pictures to show their support towards the Uyghur Muslims. And ultimately, after doing all of this, they backed down. They backed down and they forgot about it after it was a trend, after the trend was over. This shouldn't be the case. We need to keep talking about it. We need to keep raising awareness. We need to do whatever is in our power, individually and as states, as countries, as governments, as an international community, to hold China accountable for what it is doing to its populations. With that being said, we've come to an end of this very important discussion about the Uyghur Muslims in China, and we'd love to hear what you think about it as well. So do feel free to comment, do feel free to engage with us. Do you know stories? Do you know stories of minorities being violated? Do you want us to speak on these topics? Do let us know. Comment on our Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, and we'd love to have you engage with us and tell us what we can do to raise awareness on these topics as well. With that being said, you also can tune in with us 24/7, because we bring to you interesting topics throughout the day and night, and we'd love for you to engage with us right here on Relax Radio. This is Sala on the Social Roundup. Stay tuned, because we have something interesting coming up right after this. Thank you and have a good day.